Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Endrey podcast. It's been a week. It's been quite a big week. Thank you so much for your kind feedback on the Iran versus Israel episode. I wasn't sure about doing something like that, but I really enjoyed doing it myself as much as you can enjoy diving into such horrible things. But yes, still many questions that are up for grabs. And it's so tempting to get sucked into the world of opinion and news and pretending that you know what's going to happen or could happen when there's just so many dynamic uncertainties. And as I said in the episode, so many things that we just flat out can't know. And it seems that leaders of nations don't know based on all their reactions. Anyway, so I only say that to say that whilst I was really tempted to dip back into that well of exploration for today, I'm putting it to the side for a moment. I might do something for the Patreons. Yes, instead, I've listened to the feedback and I'm always keen to know what you think or what you want me to explore because I'm very open to lots of different ideas. And one topic that a friend asked me to explore was the tariffs, Trump's trade war and Trump's tariffs. And just to illustrate to you how open I am to these sorts of suggestions, I've taken it, kind of broadly ignored it, but I'll grow something from the general idea. So I think that the tariff stuff is, again, too much of a moving feast and there are too many unknowable elements to sort of usefully explore it. The principles of tariffs themselves, however, are interesting. And if you're not convinced, please do stick with me because I hope to prove to you today that not only concepts like tariffs, but plenty of other ideas from economics and maths more broadly offer super interesting philosophical guardrails and shining lights and warnings for ways that we can live our lives. So I thought I'd explore some of those a bit and grateful to have you along for the journey. I think that it should be an interesting conversation with myself. Always true. Just before we get to the music, thank you so much to my Patreon patrons for being on board and for supporting this endeavor and my various other projects. If you want to be a part of that and contribute, there's actually a free tier, so you can join for free and just get occasional content. But if you pay, you get access to everything, and it's not that much money, and it makes a huge difference to me, and I appreciate you all so much. Thanks so much again to Patreon patrons. Okay, so let's hit the music and we'll get exploring how to live a better life through some economics and mathematics concepts, but really they're just gateways to other conversations. So thanks for being along for the trip. Hope you enjoy. So as threatened, I'm going to start off talking about the sexiest topic of all, tariffs. If you're new to the concept or you've just been hearing the word in the news a bit lately, tariffs are an old idea that's getting a run. Basically what you do if you're a leader of a country or a leader of an economy is you could put up these walls to allow other people from the outside to participate in your economy. They have to pay to access it. And so the general idea is, say, if I'm Australia and I'm making Holdens and Fords, I want people to buy the Holdens and Fords, or I want those to be cost competitive where they might not otherwise be. And so if the Japanese people want to sell their secondhand cars into Australia or new cars, they've got to pay an additional amount, 30%, whatever it might be. That's the general principle. And it's one that's frowned upon broadly by economists because free open trade is a principle that allows people to do what they do best and a lower price for consumers, and it allows more economic activity to occur across diverse things as people scramble to figure out what they are the best at doing and doing that accordingly. It's like all things in economics. I should start by saying, actually, these are not laws of nature. These are sort of principles that are observable in effect, but it's hard to say what's good and what's not good. Because it depends on what your values are, what lens you're looking at them, and what vantage point you're also looking at that from. So in this particular example, the one that I gave, tariffs are terrible if you're Japanese trying to sell cars into Australia, but they're great if you want to make not as good cars from within Australia that cost a greater amount to produce. Now, I'm glad I picked that example because despite the supports that we had for the automotive industry in Australia, it did collapse because it's more expensive to produce stuff. So the people that had those skills and did those things went away and figured out something else to do. But what we can see is there are actually a lot of losers constantly in free markets. And so if you're in a country that is not to call the great USA a loser, but if you're in a country that has farmed off all of its industry to China over a couple of decades, then you have a lot of losers in the sense that there are a lot of people that don't have jobs, can't find work, and live in societies that were structured off of, previous productivity that no longer exists. They collapse. I think Detroit went from something like 2 million people to 400,000 or something like that. They've started knocking down stuff in the center of town to build farmland. It's an astonishing transformation. And so what Donald Trump, riding on the wave of his movement, has wanted to do with the tariffs is put up these fences so that America can have productive economy again, where it's viable to manufacture things. Again, these are values-based conversations. Maybe, do you really want everybody to be working in factories in your society? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes there are strategic issues for not being able to produce anything that you make, and having all of the risk of every single thing that everybody consumes be produced by a country, particularly one that is seen to be a rival in China, obviously. But I'm not trying to go into the news of that too much and to talk about that specific instance, but I just want to get the basic principle of tariffs up, because I think it's an interesting one for how we have our own lives, because the general principle that a tariff goes against is the movement of the free market. And the free market, I don't remember which economist said it. I should bring it up for good due diligence. Joseph Schumpeter came up with the concept of creative destruction, which is where ventures fail in a free market, that allows for a kind of creative destruction where who knows what the new thing will be that will come to replace it. Or I just want to make sure I've even got that right. Yeah, creative destruction describes a process where new innovations and technologies displace older ones, leading to the obsolescence of existing industries, firms, and jobs. Now, that may sound a bit dry and abstract, but it's going to be one of the defining matters of our time, if it's not already, because we are on the crest of a whole bunch of work that most of us do being rendered majority or entirely obsolete, and we have to figure out socially how we respond to that. So just to pick an example, if you have a business where you offer copywriting for in-flight magazines or something like that, that is a viable business and has been for many years, but it's not going to be. Not because there won't still be some small market for that, but because a lot of the briefs that you might get, like, give me 200 words on what's interesting about this island in Greece, they're obviously eminently outsourceable to your large language model generative AIs, and they can do the work at a fraction of the time and a fraction of the cost. So this creative destruction is going to occur across whole spheres of our economy and society. Which is the same thing, I guess. And we have to think about how to deal with that. And our options are tough because the incumbent systems of power, wealth, habit, society, they don't change easily. They don't go away quietly. They don't want to go. But in instances where they have to, we're going to have to socially navigate that. So you may be thinking in your own job, well, I do a type of thing that is quite specific and skillful that won't be replaced. At some point, it probably will. Someone will come along and build a perfect model to replace whatever it is that you do, and that will gradually extend to plumbers and things in the physical world as we have robotics take up tasks, etc. Surgeons, things that we think of as irreplaceable, they're not. And this creative destruction is going to occur on a scale totally unseen, at least in the histories that I can remember. I mean, you have various catastrophes like horrible pandemics that wipe out, a third or more of populations of societies. And even still, I think that the things that people that survive return to with their work, it doesn't require the extent of economic reformation that we're going to have, probably in the next 5-10 years. Isn't that crazy? Just want to introduce that idea of creative destruction because it's something that you will have to think about in your own life. It's often the case that I think there's the illusion that we can reform things to make sure that we can cling on to the old ways, but that's just going to be like, it's a metaphor I always use, but it's going to be like Wile E. Coyote when he runs off the cliff and he's standing there and he looks into the camera and he's waiting for the gravity to hit. He holds up a sign or whatever, and then he falls. Like that's going to be us holding on to things, being like, oh, well, actually, it's okay because I can still do this. Okay, early adopter societies are going to come and completely restructure how they do things, and they're going to have to solve all those political and social problems that come with it, and those societies will be more successful. Sorry, I didn't invent this situation, but it is one we're all going to have to deal with. So, how does that apply to tariffs? Well, tariffs are building those walls to try and protect the garden, but ultimately the garden can't really be protected. You can't really go back. So, this vision, this idea, like there'll be some margins where, okay, America will onboard a lot of manufacturing, particularly to Mexico from China, and that will serve certain purposes. But it's not going to be the case that you're going to have Detroit's not going to be a car manufacturing city ever again. Stupid to say because I don't know enough about that, but I would just, if I had to take a punt, you can't really go backwards, and you can't hold on to things because the dynamism of change is a constant, and we're entering a particularly flush peak. So I would consider, in your own personal life, okay, if you see, ooh, I've got the choice of moving and holding on to this specific way of doing things, or I can lean into the fact that that option doesn't across an arc of time really exist and figure out something else, I would lean into doing the something else, because the earlier you make a change, the easier it's going to be. Is this too fear mongering? Got to monger something, and I don't have any other tangible skills. All right, the second economics principle that I want to talk about today, and move over into the realm of how it affects real life. I want to talk about sunk cost. You may have heard of it. Maybe you're all over it. But sunk cost is an economic situation where you have invested money or time or whatever resources into something that can't be recovered. So what this naturally leads to is a cognitive bias called sunk cost fallacy, which is where you think because you've put money and time into something, it inherently holds a value that you should continue investing into. There are a few classic examples. One is, there are studies where you ask people how much they value your time. So if I ask you how much you normally spend time doing something you don't like, for, like, say, work, would you work for $5 an hour? Probably not. But maybe you bought a ticket to see a film. It was $15. The film's 3 hours, and you hate the film in the first 20 minutes. How many of you are walking out of the film? There are some strong heads out there. Hopefully, podcast listeners would be like, would never waste my time. That's what a poor economics trade-off. But most of us, and me included, would sit in that film and be like, well, I've already bought the ticket. I've already got a car park. I've already sat down. I've got popcorn or whatever. I'll just see this film that I hate. When you could go out and, write off the loss and do something else. And this is something I talked about a little bit in the episode of Changing Your Mind, because that sort of sunk cost fallacy, it's not just for small things like seeing a film, but across the arc of your whole life, where you're like, I've done this career for 20 years. I actually haven't liked it, and it hasn't been rewarding for me, and it's actually not even going that well. But because I've done it for 20 years, I should continue to do the best that I can in that, when, perhaps staying in that realm blinds you to the alternatives. And so, yeah, I think that this sunk cost one feeds on nicely from the tariffs, because we've invested in a selfhood, skills, lifestyle, built a livelihood off of those things, and then built, the structures of our surroundings. Like maybe we've got a mortgage that's based on our wage, or maybe we've got clothes that match our career, or whatever it is you can imagine. But if the kernel at the center of that no longer exists, eventually the rest of that will have to change one way or the other. So yes, walk out of the cinema for the film that you don't like early, and realize that if your time is worth more than the cost of the ticket across that period, get out and make the change. It's a fun economics idea. I should say at some point, who am I to be talking about economics ideas? I'm not an economist. I'm not a mathematician, but I did, in my time at working on the problem of climate change within the Australian government department of the same name, I did spend a lot of time around economists and thinking of economic ideas, and took a couple courses. In particular, shout out to Steve Hatfield Dodds, who yes, introduced me to many of these ideas, and they've usefully shaped my life. So hopefully sharing that with you right now. Unless you've skipped past this podcast to listen to what? Lex Friedman hit someone with a wet lettuce? Kanye, what about love? God bless him. Sunk cost leads nicely on to the next one, which is opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is described as the loss of other alternatives when one option is chosen. So say, for example, you choose to stay in that film that you hate, and there's 2 more hours to go. You could leave with the person you went to the film with and walk around the lake and see some turtles and have an ice cream and get some sunshine and run into some friends and whatever. You get the idea. Opportunity cost reflects all the things that you forego by choosing a particular option. So what does that mean in your individual life? Well, it can mean a lot. In fact, this is by the by, but I love to play the computer game Age of Empires 2. I haven't played it for a couple of years because I got kids, so it's kind of, I don't have the chance. I know that that's a waste of time, and I know that as much as I enjoy it, I also enjoy doing things that lead to other benefits in life rather than just enjoying my present moment, which is not to be discounted. But I know I enjoy things that build over time as well in different ways, and so my username when I played online was opportunity cost. And I did that as a little reminder to myself, like, okay, you can play this game, but what's the opportunity cost? You could be writing a song that you could get to sing for years and, use in your profession or whatever, like all these other things. And it didn't work at all. I clocked about 2,000 hours on Age of Empires 2 with the name opportunity cost. And all it really meant was that strangers would always assume I was an economist, which I was fine with. But yes. So what's opportunity cost look like in your own life? I don't know. Think about it. Like, do you have any sort of hobbies or things that you do that you just do because you have done them in the past? Are you in a basketball team and you go just because you already know how to play basketball, but actually it's fine. But, maybe the opportunity cost is you could be getting tennis lessons and that would be somehow superior to you, whatever. Like, you also can't waste all your cognitive bandwidth all day interrogating everything. But it is for sure worth a consideration. Like, what's the opportunity cost of hanging out with a friend that makes you feel bad? Well, it stops you pursuing hanging out with a friend that might make you feel good or whatever. I mean, I'm not trying to present as though I have answers to big questions in your life. I just think that opportunity cost is an interesting metric through which to look at the behaviors that you do. It could be related to your business. What activity do you do? Well, you could do everything. You could go out in your business and you could sell 10 products, but if you were to get rid of 9 of them and just sell one of them, well, what would that mean? Maybe you could focus more on marketing it better, or maybe you could focus more on making it a superior product to your competitors or whatever. Like, if you could think of a realm of human endeavor, it's a realm of human endeavor that you can apply the idea of opportunity cost to. And I hope it's a useful tool if you weren't utilizing it already, or if you were, I hope this is a nice reminder for what you could be doing. Even now, listening to this podcast, could you be listening to a better podcast? No. But you could be, I don't know, calling up a long lost lover or reconnecting with your parents or baking something great. All those things you can do while listening to podcasts, I will remind you. And I insist that you do. Another important economics concept that I think is useful to real life is value from trade. There can be a trap with our brains as predictive machines to think that things are fixed where everywhere they are dynamic. So in this instance, I've got 10 oranges and my friend Jane has 10 apples. And so from the outside, it could look like 20 pieces of fruit. That's the value. There's 10 oranges and there's 10 apples. But actually, no, we can radically change the value of those things without changing the net amount that's produced through trade. And how this works is, you can imagine if you're eating a delicious apple and you have another one, you're like, oh, this is great. You go through a day of eating apples. You get up the next day, you're like, apple number 6. I'm kind of sick of apples. You go to Jane and they swap 5 of their oranges for 5 of your apples, and suddenly you can mix it up. You're generating value out of nothing. Instead of having just the one thing that's the same, you get the joyful experience of something that, nutritionally is different to, or whatever, like variety, spice of life. And actually, apples and oranges aren't actually the center of the value of trade here. They're just the example. But you can imagine, similarly, if you've got 100 pens, well, you actually don't need 100 pens. So trade 95 of them, and then who knows what you'll get. And I'm glad I picked pens, because there was that person who traded up from a pen to a house. They just made one trade at a time by identifying value with what somebody else might want to trade. And they ended up getting to a house. In fact, trade pen for house. Let's have a look at what they traded. Oh, sorry. I'm glad I looked it up. It started off with a paperclip and landed a 2-story farmhouse in 14 trades. This is Kyle McDonald in 2005. Great. And look, a lot of those trades were probably exaggerated in value because of the novelty of people wanting to get involved with it. Let's see what the trades are. Like, the novelty of the story is already something, so they're trading on that rather than just the paperclip or whatever. But I'll bring up for you what they... Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is great. So Kyle McDonald started with a red paperclip, which he traded for a fish-shaped pen. Traded the fish-shaped, I mean, that's cool. Traded the fish-shaped pen for a hand-sculpted doorknob. Traded the doorknob for a Coleman stove. Traded the Coleman stove for a Honda generator. I mean, this is just 4 trades already. Traded the generator for a Budweiser neon sign and an empty keg. Traded the neon sign and the empty keg for a snowmobile. I guess if you've... See, this is the thing. If you've got an old snowmobile lying around, it means nothing to you potentially. So you kind of... A neon sign, maybe you need that, an empty keg. I mean, even just looking around my room, I can see like there's a couple old like MacBook Minis that mean nothing to me. If someone walked up to my house today and said, "I'll give you a $200 classical guitar for your MacBook Mini," which may be worth $600, I wouldn't even know. I would probably take it because it's an easy trade for me to make and it gives me genuine value in my life. All right, they traded the snowmobile for a trip to British Columbia. They traded the trip for a cube van. Reasonable. Traded the van for a recording contract. Who are these people? Traded a recording contract for a year's rent in Phoenix. Again, if you have an empty house in Phoenix and you want a recording contract, you know, like people have all sorts of idle commodities. You can generate tremendous value in trade without doing anything. It's so interesting. So he traded the year's rent for a day with Alice Cooper. Did Alice Cooper just want to live in Phoenix or something? Traded that for a snow globe. Is the snow globe worth $1 million? I don't know. Traded the snow globe for a movie role and traded the movie role for a 2-story farmhouse in Saskatchewan. There's a lot of things to drill in there, but the general principle that you can create value out of it's not creating value out of nothing, but you're creating value without having to produce additional things. It still takes work, but the reason this is interesting is because these opportunities for trade represent how exchange generally enriches your life. And there are economic and social pressures in current society that sort of reduce us to nuclear units or even individuals. And that radically impoverishes us. And we should really fight against that, because the things that drive us in those directions are often looking at economic considerations, completely blind to the value of exchange as a commodity generating activity. So, for example, is my life richer if I talk to my neighbors? Yes. Like, I mean, this is not an abstract. My neighbors are fantastic. We hang out reasonably often. I'd like to see them more, but the value that they get at the moment is I'm going and watering their plants every day. What would it cost for them to get someone to come and water their plants while they're on a 10-day holiday or whatever? I can't even imagine. It would be probably hundreds of dollars for such a small task. It costs them absolutely nothing. On the other hand, they will take care of my kids for a couple of hours here and there. They will walk the dog when we're busy. I've got in my fridge right now a mother kombucha from my neighbor Pony. Thank you so much if you're listening. That I would never have gone out and gotten otherwise. So it's not even just the cost of a kombucha starter. It's the fact that I wouldn't have it in my life, and it's so much richer to have it now. And so this type of value that you can get from trade, it's not just an economic, boring free market principle. It is a real world value, and I think there are a million ways in which it's enriched my life to have the conceptual idea of increasing the sort of surface area of the exchanges that you have. And I hope that you can see the value of that and maybe take some steps yourself, because something I've really noticed is that every time I go out, something happens. I don't even because if you sit at home, you know what's going to happen. If you in a consumptive mode where you sit and watch Netflix, I can tell you what's going to happen in that hour. If you go for a walk and just chat to people, you don't know what's going to happen. And the things that have happened to me in my life, just by being someone who's naturally motivated to be a bit chatty and to have more of these types of social exchanges than others, unspeakable. Like I could not tell you the benefits. I mean, right down to like having places to live, or learning the most important things that could come to me, or getting jobs for others, or like whatever it is, or giving to others, which is also something that makes you feel better than not doing it. Yeah, the wealth that comes from exchange is enormous, and it's not just monetary exchange. Although if any of you are enterprising out there, go out there and see if you can trade a red paper clip in 14 trades for a house, because that sounds like a good deal for me. And then a good deal for me because you will give me half of that house. Thank you. So the social value of trade is enormous, but I actually shouldn't undersell also the financial value of trade. I don't mean value in terms of how you can make money in life, but in how you can improve your life. I mean, it's kind of the opposite now in terms of accruing things, because we're in a state where our societies are so physically productive in that we generate so much shit that it's kind of an albatross around the neck in many ways. And a fallacy that I fall for all the time is I'll have a box full of crap. I mean, I've got one in my room right now that I'm looking at, and the value of the stuff in terms of its purchase value would be $500 plus. So in my mind, I'm like, well, I can't just give that away because it I spent money on it, sunk cost fallacy, and I want to get some of that money back on selling it. But the value to me of not having a box of shit in my life where I do my work would be enormous. Just to clear that cognitive space and to feel calm and not have a task hanging over me every time I look at it. It would easily be worth $500 if I were to think, would I pay? I mean, it's been there for a year, so would I pay $1.20 a day to not have it in my room? Probably. And to think that it's not even actually paying that, it's just not receiving that. So maybe that's a better way of putting it. Would I accept having a box of rubbish in my room for the benefit of $1.20 a day? Absolutely no way. No way. It's absurd to even think about. So I'm going to set out and give away this stuff. Yeah, I'll get back to you on it if I manage to succeed. Yes. Understanding that value is not fixed, but it's subjective in your experience and something you get to determine and interact with, I think is a really useful, powerful thing that I've noticed that really successful people seem to have a better natural relationship with than people who are struggling. Which leads nicely to the next one I want to explore, which is something being fungible does not mean it has an equal value. What does that mean? $500 is not the same to me as it is to, I can't even think of who rich people are. Elon Musk. I mean, that's stupid to pick. $500 to the person that lives in the building next door to me is not worth what $500 is to me. And your first $500 is not worth the same as your last $500. And this is not just true for financial resources in your life, but it's also true for time. And it's a trap I see lots of people fall into a lot, and fall into myself, which is you might think that to spend 2 hours on something in a week is the same, when it's totally different. Doing 2 hours, we have to wake up early to do something or stay up late to do it, it's not the same as just in a time where you could slot in nicely, or if it's across a meal time, or spending 2 hours on a task in a day where you have 5 other 2-hour tasks. That final 2 hours, it's actually not 2 hours. It may as well be a longer period of time. We should value it differently. Time is not a fungible commodity. And I was reminded of this last night, in fact, at football training, where my friend Charlie, he's in school, and happy birthday, Charlie, just turned 17. And he has the next 2 months off, and he has spent the last 2 weeks just playing Xbox and watching South Park. And he said, it's fine because I've got so many holidays. So, I won't spend the rest like this. Do we think that that's true? I don't, based on my personal experience, I think that if you start off doing something like that, the value that you set for something is not easy to change from within. In fact, it'd be a cool experiment to check in with Charlie in a month's time and see if he's, making the most of his youth, which is not the point of youth, but to see if he's still playing a lot of Xbox and watching South Park simultaneously, which I got to say, sounds fantastic. Sounds like a really good use of boy summer. But the idea stood out because if you have, say you have 8 hours in a day, if you decide, oh, I'm going to spend the first 2 hours playing video games, does that mean that the next 6 hours are totally free for being productive in the same way as if you spent the first 2 hours doing something else? I think absolutely not. I think we've experienced that dynamism in our own lives where we surprise ourselves when we're busy, how much we get done, and we surprise ourselves when we've got heaps of free time, how readily we waste it. And that's a trap that we can fall into. I mean, do whatever you want. I don't think... would I prefer that Benjamin Netanyahu was the type of person that was wasting his summers? Absolutely. There's no virtue in just being busy. But I think there's something there in the value of time doesn't feel the same. Your 4 hours after work on a Friday do not feel the same as your 4 hours in the morning on a Monday when you start work. That stuff is so obvious to say, but it is easy to treat things that are fungible as though they're equal. The same is true for money, and this bias is really fun to see in something like Tulip Madness, or even what's happening with Bitcoin and other such coins at the moment. I don't know enough about it to weigh into it, but I think that potentially most of us don't know enough about it relative to how much money is sitting in this asset that currently generates nothing. It's kind of an interesting ultimate endpoint for capitalist behavior. It's very complex, requires a lot of energy, generates no intrinsic value. Okay, not none. Please don't come in with crypto people, because I do understand the benefits. But for the average holder, it's not generating value. Other than the increase of its resale value or loss as it may be, but generally increase. And that's super interesting because it's attracted a lot of human resources and endeavor and energy and human behavior. But I'm off topic. The non-fungibility one is actually, I could probably do a whole episode on and will down the line, because it's something that we fall into a lot. We treat people as fungible. We treat units of money as fungible. We treat anything that we can reduce to a quantifiable number as a statistic as fungible. And it's just so like it takes about 2 seconds of critical thought to dissect it and to realize that the things that are fungible are not equal. And yet we build so many of our social conceptions of things, and indeed our societies themselves, off of the concept that there is some sort of relative equality between fungible things. So something to explore for me in the future. This little note. There are so many fun cognitive biases to talk about and explore, and I think I'll do a few of them just for my patrons. This is a little incentive for you if you're not signed up to come over and join. But I will say actually that there's plenty of studies that show how giving is more rewarding than receiving. If you get $5, you maybe get as a gift, maybe a mild boost. But if you're given $5 to give to someone else, that can make you feel great all day. So to think that you could just, for a small number of dollars monthly, support the creation of this community and not just make me feel fantastic and able to live and raise my children, but generate this type of value that you're getting, hopefully, from this exchange of ideas, and forward that on to others in the world. Wow, what a almost holy thing to be doing. So please do consider joining up onto my Patreon. And a little incentive is I'm going to throw a few more of these cognitive biases. I'm going to move away from just the math stuff into more general cognitive biases to explore over on the Patreon. Which probably brings me to my final one. I've spent so much more time talking about this stuff than I thought I would. I listed out maybe, I think I have 15 points here that I wanted to go into. And even still on each dot point, I think I could have gone for twice as long. So thanks for indulging me. And I hope it hasn't been too abrupt. But last one I want to talk about is economics by coercion. And this is a great economic fallacy. And the idea is that we could conceive of how an economy might best work and then push that onto people to make it true. That never works. It can't work. It doesn't exist as an option, and yet it's pursued socially in many, many, many corners, and I guess at the top levels of power also routinely. And it's a crazy trap, and one that I think translates nicely into how we conceive of our own lives. I'll go into that in a second. But firstly, if you say, for example, if you think, wow, if everybody just shared all resources equally and everybody got to have, a share of the pie just based on their existence, because we are all, people are all worthy of care and resources and whatever, and everyone should have a house and everyone should have, all these things are great principles. And then in order to have that system exist, you realize that, actually not everybody wants that. In fact, a large number of people don't want that. And you have to coerce people to do it. It is doomed to fail. The more you have to coerce people, the quicker it is doomed. But it's not a sustainable model over time, inevitably. And so obviously I'm talking about communism in this particular one, which is so predictable now because we've seen the particular experiment run again and again. And it's always like, okay, that's an impure version of communism. Yes, because it is inherently an impure pursuit, because you've got this utopian ideology that you're moving towards, and to execute it, if you are so inclined, you're happy to make, for the virtue of the great utopia, make increasing compromises in what you do to people on the way. And that involves we'll just imprison everybody who disagrees. We'll just execute the people who are the type of people we don't like. And that's like, these are not exaggerations. These are under exaggerations, if anything, of what sort of has to be done to maintain a certain level of that type of a utopian structure. It can't exist. And just to be totally fair to people of the other proclivity, the same is true of free markets. People don't naturally like to see everything as a tradable commodity, and people don't naturally like to do everything they can to accrue resources. Some people do, but they are absolutely outliers and in a very small percentage. And so you can't force society to be like that either. And even then, the sort of midpoint that we have at the moment, I think, living in Europe and being from Australia, I think these are great examples. If the luxuries of those societies, if they can only exist off the back of outsourcing a huge amount of environmental harm, or not even outsourcing, in some cases insourcing, but causing a huge amount of environmental negative costs and also human misery. For example, like it just routinely comes out that, say, the frozen prawns that you get in Woolworths, they are fished by indentured refugees who are sort of living as slaves under fishing boats in Myanmar or whatever, or off of Thailand. Or, I mean, these are real examples. That's not a sustainable system either, because it's generating consequences that aren't worn from within. So there are superior models that can be pursued. Maybe you can get away with it for a long period of time, and we've seen instances of that with literal slavery, being the backbone of huge empires. But superior models emerge and ideas spread, and the same will be hopefully true, because the consequences of endlessly trashing, say, the global commons of the physical environment are obvious. We know that we can't keep doing that. And something will have to change. So communism by coercion, no good. Free markets such as we have it by coercion, no good. The point is, you can't use coercion infinitely to work towards an outcome that is seen to be utopian, because it is by its very nature then not utopian. And so the same is true in our individual personal lives, where I could say of myself, oh goodness, I don't make enough money being a creative person. That's a big problem for me. My life would be a lot easier if I were to go into something that I know has a demand. Say, I should be an investment banker. I'm going to do that. And so I go and study these things and, get a job and whatever. And then, even just looking at me, can you imagine this? And then I'm going to go put my head down and I'm going to put in 80 hours a week of grind to be an investment banker and only care about making money, so that I can be in a better position to support my family and support my life. And I'll abandon the idea that I enjoy creating with other people or sharing ideas or playing music or whatever it may be, helping people to do things. I'll abandon all of that because I know that it will be materially significantly better for me to do that. Unfortunately, that's another economics by coercion. It doesn't exist as an option. Like it's all well and good to say I would like to do this, but it's not who I am. So in the same way, whoever you are, there will be specific things to which you're attracted and repulsed, and you kind of need to reckon with them, because it can be so tempting and so painful so often to think, oh, my life would be so much better if I could just do this, or if I could just have this, or this type of thing that I see somebody else doing something and it works so well. You can't coerce yourself to be somebody else. You can't coerce yourself to do things that are degrading. You can do it exactly like communism. You can do it for a little bit of time, but over the arc of your life, there'll be huge physical consequences and social consequences and well-being consequences, and etc. And actually, one that comes to mind is there was an Australian guy. I mean, this is huge overreach because I don't know enough about it. But there's an Australian guy who was the CEO of World McDonald's at like 39 or something. So he was running a lot of burners to be able to do that. And he died at like 42 or something, because there's only so much that you could put onto your human body, even if you're like, I'm so determined to get this, I'm going to do this and whatever. It's kind of the same as when I talked about in the changing your mind, the Kipchoge being a marathon. I could decide that I'm going to be an Olympic marathon runner because I think it's a virtuous and admirable and rewarding thing to do. The option doesn't exist. It doesn't exist to me. And so in the same way, I think that sort of economics by coercion, you can see it. You can see groups trying to apply to do that type of thing. You can see whole of society trying to apply that thing. And it's tempting to do it in our own lives, but it doesn't exist as an option, not without consequences. And you've got to listen to those. All right. What do we think? Was this rewarding for you? I really hope so, because I enjoy exploring these concepts. I could do it all day. Yes, I'm going to go on and talk about a few more cognitive biases for those of my patrons. Thank you so much for supporting me. If you're watching, they're all going to come up on screen now. And just have a great day. I hope that you are immune from many of the hardships going on in the world. And I hope that your own life is just cruising along and this is all luxury stuff to take in. All the best.